Hello YouTube, my name's Sean Connors and welcome back to the Outsiders channel, and for the purposes of today's video we're going to be talking about building a region, or effectively a sandbox, because that's really what it is. And I'm going to take you through the step-by-step process to being able to do this, and all you'll actually need is some pens, a piece of graph paper, here's one that I always use for this purpose, and some tracing paper, and I've got a pad of tracing paper with me. And what you'll eventually do is create a regional map of the campaign world that you want to use. Now this is one that I worked on last night. That's the finished one. It's called Felgarth. But I'm going to take you through the steps to doing this, and it's actually a lot simpler than it appears, and it will also help you build the foundations of your campaign and give you some initial thoughts around how to do arcs and various storylines, but not too much depth. The whole purpose of this is just to get you to the point that you could actually do your own sandbox, and what does that feel like, and the steps that you would do to achieve it. So let's have a look at them. So before you start drawing, as you can see here behind me, I started drawing on the paper. I actually gridded out a 30 by 40 hex area. Now I don't know if you'll be able to see it, but there's a faint outline running across the top. That's my 30 by 40 hexes. And why I chose that amount of distance is pretty simple. Each hex represents 6 miles. When you work it out, that's roughly 38,000 square miles, and that's approximately the size of Greece. And if we consider Greece and the mythology and everything else that goes into Greece, if it's good enough for Greece, it's good enough for a whole encompassing world of mythology, then it's good enough for a sandbox, it's good enough for a regional map. And that's why I did it. So the next question that I had to face was it going to be an all-encompassing sandbox, everything all in that 38,000 square miles, or was there going to be room to manoeuvre outside? So I took the decision that there wasn't going to be any room to manoeuvre outside, and I began to create a series of islands. The shadowing you see here was actually an unusual piece of plastic I was using to map things out on my piece of paper, but you could use a ruler. It was just something I found quite convenient to put one hand on while I'm actually using pens. It's just me. But I started to do islands, and the reason I chose islands, I thought of an archipelago that was very isolated from originally the idea was very isolated away from the continent. Nearest large landmass was over 3 months away, so it meant that this would be the entire game world. So I started taking the process of creating this sort of fractured area. Let's have a look at it as it unfolds. So you can start to see behind me on the tracing paper, you can begin to see the island starting to take shape. Again, if I wasn't happy with the shape or the layout, it was easy enough to rub off the tracing paper. I find tracing paper is a very good one when you're actually going to print as well. When you go and print up your map, it comes out very well on black and white, so that's another reason why I chose it. And that's the initial steps I took, just started to build the actual islands, and then things start happening. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so the islands are taking shape. Now comes the real trick of this. We now need to make some decisions around how to populate it. What are the first steps for populating it without really any real thought behind them? Just some initial steps. And the trick I've always used is 15 locations to sum up. In essence, there will probably be others eventually, but 15 key locations to sum up the human, demi-human population that exists in that region. So the little black dots that you see around the screen behind me represent those areas. I've tried to use a little bit of logic so you can see where you potentially would house them, and you'll see this grow slowly, how I link the region together just so that it was logical. And that was the first steps. There is going to be 30 other locations, but they're going to be interesting. They're going to be the potential ruins, isolated locations, holes, pits, whatever you want to call them. Some interesting locations or ideas that I've got to formulate the territory and really flesh it out. Now, of course, this isn't, that isn't everything that's in the world, but it's a fantastic start for your regional map, and that's the basis I always use. So before we move on from here, let's just quickly recap. So we've had tracing paper, pencil, we've mapped out 30 by 40 hexes. We've decided to go for a very closed sandbox initially, the concept. We've drawn out an archipelago, some islands that have been smashed apart, and we started mapping on 15, or you could have slightly less or more, but I always go for 15 key locations to start, and then 30 others. So that's what we started here at this point, we got to that. Let's now move on a little bit further. Now behind me, you can see the first steps of me actually colouring in, working out where the mountain regions, etc. go. Now don't worry too much about being some sort of art expert, I'm certainly not, but the whole point of this is to make it look logical. So the mountains should have a flow to them, Any rivers you add should look fair and logical. Any forests you build do feel right. And if the area has been ripped apart, I wanted a continuity across the islands that seemed to work. Once I was happy, I began colouring them in. This is just really for my benefit, just to give some tone on the paper and to make it stand out for when I go to photocopy. So those are the first little steps. You can also see behind me here the beginnings of the roads that link some of the towns, and they would be more like tracks or maybe cobble roads. I still hadn't decided, but I knew that they had to have a logical link. Now, we know that each hex is worth 6 miles, so we have a fair indication of roughly anything within 30 miles, that's 5 hexes, is roughly doable in a day. Maybe 40 is doable in a day with a push. So that again fits the style of logic I had to make it an interesting setting. So some locations can be reached in a day, some can't. Terrain will play into how far you can go, and those are important little steps. You don't need to know exactly how it's going to work at this stage. All you need is the idea. So again, let's move it forward. In this particular scene behind me, you can see a bigger landmass starting to appear here, this large landmass into the corner. Now that actually came about by pure chance. So on my main map, this I eventually called the region Felgarth, and the landmass is here running off down this side of the map. So there is potential for this actual sandbox to grow out, but the way I stopped it from growing at the moment is I decided there was an ice sheet that ran right up to the edge of these mountains, and it's actually slowly retracting backwards, revealing this landmass. Yes, it's begun to be populated, but the actual mountain range here has stopped any real progression. So it is sort of self-contained, but with the scope to go further later. So it's just these little things that can make a difference within your planning. So I was quite happy with the way it was looking, and you can see behind me up there how the actual mountains look with the road running between the two locations, a little bit of forest on the smaller little island masses that haven't got any detail on them at the moment. And again, we'll move forward and see how it begins to take shape. So again, behind me you can see the lands are beginning to take shape, the roads are working. I've added another feature here. This is actually, I've decided to call this Old Smoky. It's going to be a volcano that occasionally rumbles. Also thought it'd be a great home for a red dragon. It just sort of made sense, and I felt that the region had obviously been destroyed before by something very powerful. It might appear to be the volcano. It could equally have been the dragon that destroyed the region before. I hadn't really decided at this point. It's very up in the air, but I decided I liked the name, so added it in, and it was another feature that will come out in a minute. So I'm not going to keep giving you loads of maps. Let's take the map forward to quite a much closer finishing point. Now I've started naming the various locations. You'll notice I've started naming what the towns are, whether they're actually, I've started scaling them up, whether they're towns, whether they're keeps, whether it's a city. There's only one city in this region, and I've started to do those sort of details on the initial 15 areas that are human and demi-human centric. Again, I've started working out in my own mind and writing down roughly a paragraph. That's all, roughly what that area is at this stage. Let's again move it forward. Now, I'm a good couple of hours into the process by now. You can see I've started adding the colouring of the sea around the edges of the land masses. I'm beginning to see those 15 areas come alive. It's looking logical. You can see how things could be linked, how the roads continue down, why all the islands and towns are where they're located. It makes sense, personally. There has to be a certain amount of logic. Also, there's a number of areas that are very adrift of the kingdom that probably haven't been explored. So it's a very wild, untamed location that probably has some battle for control. Again, I hadn't really decided what that would look like, but that does come as the map unfolds. So now you can see the map's really starting to take shape. You can see that I'm adding more details on about other unique locations. These are the 30 locations that are going to form part of the potential stories that the players can get involved in, and maybe form some of the arcs. So I'm going to again move the map forward a little bit more towards its conclusion, and then just quickly sum up. So behind me you can see how the map is beginning to take shape. You can see the landmass here, how it's cut off by the ice shelf. You can see loads of new locations going in. You can see how I've split the world into 4 kingdoms actually. Felgarth is made up of 4 areas. You've got sort of the new world, which is the continent, which has been discovered, simply called Felgarth. The city-state of Corinne. You've got the Sea Prince barony at the top of the map. And towards the right-hand side, you've got the Iron Lord region. Yes, I've taken some influences from things I've actually seen or heard or thought about, but that's what you do as a GM. And these 30 locations are just things that interest me. They could be pictures out of a book. They could be from an encyclopedia. They could be something that you saw that you thought was useful. I've decided that I would draw some influence from an old resource, and I'm just going to quickly show you that resource. So I've taken quite a lot of influence from an old book that I have, which is called The Book of Ruins. This is by Judges Guild. It's Michael Mayhew. I love this book. It's provocative. The artwork is not the best in the world, but it does a good job. It's full of unusual locations. For example, Hegrash the Bandit Ogre. You know, I just love the idea behind the location for Hegrash. Some of the art's fairly basic, but it's fun. And I pretty much could plunder this book fully and put some of those locations into the map, which I've done. Now, once you start thinking about these 30 other locations, most of them want to be sort of one-stroke, two-shot deals. You know, one session, two session max. And the remaining 10 could be big areas or large, and a really good idea that could expand into its own story arc. You haven't really got to worry about giving any of these areas too much detail. If you've got something like that, brilliant, you could use it. If you've got your own ideas, brilliant, incorporate them. And I would normally, my second part of this map I would normally do is start putting around the edge of it some of the pictures that I like to represent the lines that I've drawn, like the black stone, what that actually looks like, the pit, what does it look like. So I have this vision of skulls on sticks. I'd start mapping that out in my own mind, ready to start building the layers that would become beyond the regional map. And plus as well, using this regional map to hone down into one location that really would interest me as a starting point for this campaign. But already we've got a wealth of information from this simple 30 by 40 grid. This large area. I'm going to be joined by Paige. Come and sit in with me, Paige. Thank you very much. Another great influence in my life. Thank you, Paige. So we've got a wealth of information that we can now draw upon. And in following up videos to this, if you like what you see in this video, we can hone in on a section. We can start thinking about the story arcs. We can take some of these locations and start fleshing them out. Now, I may use that particular book as a guide, but I'm going to do my own work in fleshing them out fully. Who is Hegrash? What does he do? Why is he an ogre bandit? What exactly is he doing at this point? And how does that relate to this story that's going on? And what about these four kingdoms? Well, we can explore that later in another video if you like what you see. But I hope it's given you some inspiration, some food for thought. So I always get it whenever I think about these things. And I wanted to share with you, thank you Paige, I wanted to share with you my favourite tip for creating a regional map. And I hope that some of you will go on and do your own things. And I look forward to seeing some of your videos about what you come out with. Anyway, take care of yourselves. Happy gaming. And I'll speak to you all soon once I've removed that shoe out of my face. Thanks very much. Anyway, take care, happy gaming, and see you all soon. Bye-bye.